Hello students, in today's video we will learn to play one of the most popular openings in chess, the Italian game. White is going to start with e4, we have e5, the knights go out, and a very popular variation at absolutely all levels, from beginner to elite grandmasters. In this position we're going to be playing the move c3. This is the most flexible move. We don't want to play knight c3 and lose that flexibility. And in the long run, we have a couple of plans that we're going to choose from, which is going to depend also on how black is going to respond to our moves. Here, by far, knight f6 is most popular. They're attacking e4 and trying to stop us from playing d4. Now, while d4 is possible, we're going to be going for a more flexible line with pawn to d3. This is also most popular. And in this position, black usually play a prophylactic move a6. Now, if your opponents respond right away by taking over the middle, you have to know that this is a mistake. White is able to simply capture this pawn. And after knight takes d5, we have queen to b3. The b7 is touched, and the knight as well as f7 are hanging. And after a typical move like knight to a5, which seems to attack the queen and bishop, we have simply queen b5, and the bishop drops on c5. So they're unable to play bishop e6 because of the mentioned queen takes b7 as a response. Now let's go back and let's take a look at the right move for black. Of course, there are alternatives, like for example d6 is also very popular, and most of the time this is going to be just a transposition. At this moment after a6, white also starts playing prophylactically. The first move is bishop to b3. What is the point of this move? Well, we're trying to defend against any knight a5 ideas, as the bishop, as a response to knight a5, can now go to the square c2, where we're going to also protect e4, and this is going to be important if we ever play the move d3 to d4. White must be sure he isn't allowing the light square bishop to be exchanged for the black's knight. Of course, now black wasn't threatening to go knight a5, because we always have knight takes e5. Prophylaxis means that we're defending against opponent's threats before they're appearing on the board. In this position, very often black plays the move bishop a7, which is also prophylaxis. Remember when they played a6, the point is that the bishop now has this a7 square instead of typical b6 square, where it's susceptible to all kind of threats. For example, if white's knight ever goes to d2 and c4, we're able to attack that bishop on b6. And the most popular modern move right now is h3 on move 7. It is a very flexible move. Very often, white's plan is to keep the center closed in the center and then slowly build up the attack on the king side. Black in this position will either play d6 or d5. Now, our move h3, it does prevent any bishop g4s in the future. It does prevent knight g4 ideas. And in the future, it allows knight coming to h2 to go to g4 and help us build the beautiful king side attack on the right side of the board. One of the main plans for white is to go knight d2, knight f1, and then knight g3. And if we delay castling, we can actually achieve it faster because the rook is not going to be taking away the square on f1. In this position, the main move for black is to play d6, but as always in the Italian, there are many alternatives. For example, black could also castle, and I just want to mention an idea that after castling, this pin with bishop g5 becomes much stronger because h6 followed by g5 will weaken the position of the black's king now, since it's committed to the right side. While white's king hasn't not committed to the right side of the board. So if something like h6 g5 is happening, we could always play moves like h4. We have the support of the rook. This move also prevents black from playing the move d5, since right now the knight is pinned. So typically, for example, black can play d6, knight bd2, bishop e6, and after knight h2, threatening to go knight g4, white has a promising attack on the king side. So that happens if black castles. The main move for black is simply to play d6, and we're just going to be playing without castling for now, preparing this maneuver knight d2, knight f1, knight g3. If black, for instance, goes bishop e6, there's a cute little move knight g5 attacking e6 as well as f7, and after bishop takes b3 and queen b3, we're double attacking the pawn on b7 and the f7 point. After castles, we can take on b7. Black has, even some say, sufficient compensation for the pawn, but a pawn is a pawn, and I think that white has practical chances over here. Instead of playing bishop e6, black usually just castles, and now we're continuing with our main plan, knight f1, knight to g3. Now, because white didn't castle and hasn't played moves like rook to e1. d5 is very logical to try and open up the center, especially because the white's king is in the center. But let's take a look at two other very popular variations and plans for black at all levels, I would say, as well, because they're very natural. First of all, bishop e6, just simply attacking the bishop on b3, and I really do not recommend going for this. Black has significant control over the key squares in the center, so it's better just to play move like knight to g3. Very often black will play h6, defending against bishop g5 ideas. Perhaps I should also mention that after bishop takes b3, we could take with queen and with pawn. Taking with the pawn would open up the file for the rook, while it's a very natural square for the queen as well, where we're aiming at the weakened b7 point. Instead, h6 is mostly played, and over here I recommend simply knight h2, preparing knight g4, and a kingside attack. That will be your middle game plan. Now, as we go back, after knight f1, another popular line that black could go for is knight e7. Very often the Italian, they're trying to play the corresponding maneuver to our knight d2, knight f1, knight g3, perhaps to f5. They're often playing knight e7, knight g6, knight to f4. Your knight g3, knight g6 could happen. For example, castles. If they go knight f4, we do not take, but instead go for something like d4 with fantastic space in the middle, and we could continue improving our position with moves like bishop e3, rook to e1, etc. Instead, h6 is very often played, once again preventing the spin, and then something like d4, rook e8, bishop e6, bishop c2, and white has a comfortable middle game position, can continue improving position with move like bishop e3, a4, b4, and slowly try to win this technical middle game position. Instead, as we go back, let's try the most logical move, in my opinion, d5, trying to open up the center. Very often we would take in other variations of the Italian, instead here of taking, which really is considered to be not the most accurate move for white. We're going to be playing the move queen to e2. So that would be the alternative, and in this position queen e2 is much more popular. We're trying to keep the center more closed and supporting the point e4. Here black will play probably bishop e6. There are, as always in the Italian, I mentioned this a couple of times, many alternatives. Now white plays knight to g3, and we have some threats. First of all, we want to play bishop g5 and follow it up, if possible, with knight h5, or simply because bishop g5 pins the knight, we can apply more pressure on the pawn d5. So black usually releases some of the tension. It takes on e4. We have d takes e4, bishop takes b3, a takes b3. And a very common maneuver in this position is knight e8, knight d6. Knight will be better placed on d6. They're also not going to be susceptible to any pins. Example, castles, knight d6, and rook d1. And we arrive at middle game, where white remains slightly better, but black's position is rock solid. White could continue with ideas like knight f5, perhaps knight h2, knight g4, or knight h2, knight f1, knight e3. The bishop is going to go to e3. There's also a nice file for now for our rook. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hiring me as your personal online chess coach. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next.